Hello and good evening, everyone. This is John Bowens here with Equity Trust Company. Welcome to all of our Equity Trust clients, as well as all of our Equity Trust prospective clients to our webinar this evening. Really excited about the program this evening. We have some special content and information for you, as well as a special guest. Our Investor of the Year will be jumping on our call in just a few moments. Our Investor of the Year for 2018, and he's going to be actually taking us through the step-by-step process of how he did his very first rehab deal inside of his self-directed IRA. Now, we're not going to stop there. We're actually going to move on to some of the other transactions that he did in 2018, as well as what he's doing in 2019 to make a considerable return on his self-directed IRA investment. So really excited about the program. First deal, as he'll show us here in just a few moments, he made a $45,000 tax-advantaged profit, and he's going to take us through the nuts and bolts of that. So really excited about this evening's presentation. The introduction, we're going to go through and then move into our self-directed IRA Investor of the Year and bring him on the call. And ultimately, what I want to do is make sure that we really dive into the nuts and bolts, and we do a lot of question and answers with Mark. So this is going to be more Mark presenting than anyone on this call. So you can hear from a real client at Equity Trust Company that is active out in the real estate investment marketplace. And again, as I said before, Mark is not a full-time investor per se, as a career real estate investor. In fact, when he shared with me in our preparation call, he was in the insurance business his entire career, retired, and then ultimately moved into investing in real estate in his retirement years. So really excited to have him on the call with us. And stick around to the very end of the call, because we do have a special offer for anyone who's out there looking to get started with a self-directed IRA, looking to take action. We have some special opportunities for you. So with that being said, without further ado, quick disclaimer for those that have been on our webinars in the past. You've seen a similar disclaimer or this disclaimer. Equity Trust Company and its affiliates provide educational information. We're not here to provide tax, legal, or financial advice. It's important that all of our viewers and clients and such are performing their own due diligence prior to engaging in any investment transaction. So, for example, as our Investor of the Year is going to talk about, Mark, buying and flipping properties, ultimately he's responsible for performing the due diligence on, is this a good deal? Is this a safe and sound deal for myself and for my retirement portfolio? How do I put together all the pieces and parts? How do I reach out to the necessary attorneys and title companies and really build my financial team? Equity Trust Company is merely one member of your financial team. So important to understand that as you venture into self-directing your IRA or solo 401k or Roth IRA or covered education savings account or health savings account or any other tax-exempt investment account that you may be looking to self-direct here at Equity Trust Company. So our 2018 Investor of the Year, for those of you who aren't familiar with what the Investor of the Year program is, we've been doing this for a few years now. And this past year, we actually had 140 entries. In 2017, we had just over 100 entries as well. And I'm going to bring on Mark in just a moment, as he's our 2018 Investor of the Year. Our 2017 Investor of the Year, his name is Brian, and he did an interesting transaction for his first investment. And so I'll take a step back and mention him in a Reader's Digest version here. Brian had 3 CISA accounts for his children, and he bought a piece of property for $8,000, and he partnered all 3 covered education savings accounts together in order to put that transaction together. So it was a partnership investment between the 3 covered education savings accounts, bought the vacant lot for $8,000. He sold it and closed about 90 days later, and he made a $50,000 net profit, tax-free, in the covered education savings accounts. So he generated some tax-free income for his children's K through 12 education or college tuition. But with that being said, tonight is all about our 2018 Investor of the Year. I'm thrilled to have him on the call today. What I think you're going to find is incredible about what Mark is doing with his self-directed IRA is he was new to this concept. He got his first deal under his belt, and now he's completely off to the races, and he's doing multiple transactions. So it wasn't just one and done. He's doing multiple transactions, and that's why we're naming him here our 2018 Self-Directed Investor of the Year. So without further ado, I am incredibly honored and privileged to bring Mark on the call with us. Mark, are you here with us?
I am, John. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And Mark, to kick things off and get us going, could you share with our group a little bit about your background and what got you to real estate investing and using your self-directed IRA?
Oh, sure, John. Thanks. Yeah, I was a career salesman for 35 years before I retired at the age of 59 and a half, or right at 60. I have dabbled a little bit into real estate. I own a condo on the beach and a condo in the mountains, in addition to my primary residence. But prior to investing through real estate via the equity trust, I really didn't have any investments at all. And there was a reason why equity trust, or in addition to real estate investments. And the real reason is diversification. I needed to diversify my portfolio, not to have all your portfolio in stocks, specifically knowing full well what has happened in the stock market over the last 60 to 90 days so far for this year. It doesn't look well in the stock market. It's up and down, up and down. So I was looking to diversify. Question was why and how did I get to equity trust? I actually, after retiring, I moved some money to self-direct by purchasing stocks, and the folks at E-Trade that I was with suggested and gave me equity trust name, and I did some research on equity trust, and then shortly right afterwards I moved money starting in March of 2017, knowing full well that I'd have some investment opportunities in the future. Then I had to go out and start finding some investments. The only regret that I've got, John, is that I didn't do this 10 years ago. If I would have known that this avenue was open 10 years ago, I would have jumped all over this, specifically when the market crashed. But I had money in a traditional 401k and IRAs, and I was not aware that this vehicle was even available. So thank you.
Oh, outstanding. Appreciate the introduction, Mark. And I share that and can appreciate what you said there about regretting, and I wish I would have done it many years ago. I can't tell you how many investors I work with and kind of take them through the process, and that's what they tell me after they do their first deal and they get things up and running and they're starting to see profit. That typically they're saying, hey, I regret that I didn't do this sooner. But I let people know you can't beat yourself up over that, because there's not a whole lot of information and education out there for people on self-directed IRA investments. It's not technically, or it's not necessarily a mainstream type of investment strategy. Like you said, you contacted TD Ameritrade. They said, hey, we can't do it. You're going to need to find a custodian, and they mentioned Equity Trust Company, which is great, and that's what brought you to us. So ultimately, the idea is you can't go back in time, but you can start and plant the tree today and get that going. You've obviously been a great shining example of that. So that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into the case studies and get things going. As an aid to take us through these case studies, what I want everybody on our call to either jot down on a notepad, or if you have a Word document up and you can write this down, it's a three-step process. I don't want folks to get overwhelmed with the process of executing on moving money and buying a property. We can take you through that process, and we're going to give you the nuts and bolts. Ultimately, the lowest common denominator here, to break it down for you, is a simple three-step process. The first step of the process is to establish and fund the account. The second step is identify and direct the investment. And then the third step is manage the investment. So Mark and I are going to take you through his case studies using this three-step process. Again, establish and fund the account, identify and direct the investment, and then manage the investment. And I'll mention on establishing and funding the account, very, very critical that the account is set up and funded well in advance. I can't tell you how many folks contact us 3, 4, 5 days before they need to close on a real estate deal. The property that they put under contract is in their LLC or their name personally, and now they want to fund it with their IRA. And unfortunately, a lot of those folks just miss out on the deal. I worked with an individual, came to one of my seminars. He calls me up, says, "Hey, John, I regret to inform you, but I did something you told me not to do at the seminar, which was I waited till the last moment, the 11th hour, to fund my account, and ultimately had to rehab the property with his own personal money. So bought the property, sold it, made about a $30,000 profit, but he paid $10,000 in tax. So as a $10,000 expense to not have done it with the IRA. So ultimately, the lesson to be learned here is get the account up and running well in advance so you have an earnest money deposit and you can move forward with the process. The second step, identify and direct the investment. And then the third step, manage the investment. We'll talk a little bit through our My Equity portal and how that technology tool can allow you as an investor to streamline the investment process by simply doing everything online through Equity Trust Company, from the actual execution of the initial earnest money deposit to effecting the final real estate purchase, sending the money out to the title company, to the managing of all expenses. Just about everything can be done through this online channel. So we'll talk through that. Okay, so with that being said, the sort of flagship transaction, if you will, for Mark here, which really was the catalyst for him to be the winner of our 2018 Investor of the Year, was a rehab project. So let's start with, Mark, you've already talked a little bit about that first step of the process to get the account up and running. I know you mentioned you contacted TD Ameritrade and then they contacted us. But can you take our audience a little bit more through that process of the rollover from your 401k? It sounds like you had some IRAs in there as well. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you worked through that process of opening your account?
Sure. When I contacted Equity Trust, they actually had some put me in contact with it was Fidelity that was actually managing my company's 401k that I retired from. In addition to that, then I had a couple of other companies that I had some IRAs, some previous IRAs with that both of the companies, all three of the companies, it was Janus, Century, American Century, in addition to Fidelity, and they all said that there's a certain way that you have to do it. There's forms that need to be done so you can authorize it, and they said, realistically, if you just fill out the forms and have Equity Trust contact us, they'll do it and finish up all the paperwork itself. And John, you are correct, because it does take a while. You need to fund this in advance before you start trying to invest. Because I believe from start to finish, when I started moving some money over, it took 2 weeks to maybe, it could have been 30 days before the money was actually eligible to start investing.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because, like I always say, we're at the mercy of that other financial institution. So it could take a few days, or it could take, upwards of 3 to 4 weeks. And I appreciate you mentioning the Fidelity account. So for viewers that have 401ks or other employer-sponsored plans, what Mark was doing there is he had to reach out to his 401k administrator to initiate a direct rollover. And it's a fairly simple process. You reach out to them with Fidelity Investments, for instance. In 9 out of 10 cases, they're simply processing everything over the phone and then sending out a check directly to Mark's address. And then Mark has his account set up ahead of time with us, and then he just mails that to our offices for deposit. The IRAs, those would be transferred via what we call a trustee-to-trustee transfer. So Mark would fill out an account transfer form, send it to us. We send the form over to the current IRA company, and then they send us the money back by check or wire transfer. Now, it's important to know that and I'll ask you, Mark, when you rolled that money over or transferred that money, did you pay any taxes or penalties or have any IRS notifications that you did something improper?
No, because again, I let the professionals handle it, so there was no tax consequences. The only consequence that I had was if it was, and some of them was a check. There was, I think, 2 checks issued, and then one of them was a wire. Wire was immediate. The checks have to, they take a lot longer for everything to clear.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's if we can get a wire transfer in the door, that's a little bit better scenario. That way the funds are available and ready to be deployed out for an investment. So we got the account set up. We got the account running. Mark's in a good position to be able to pull the trigger. Let's move on to step 2, which is directing the investment. Mark, take us through how did you find the deal or who brought you the deal? How did you get it under contract? Take us through that step of the process.
Sure. Whether you create your own luck or I was just lucky, I'm not sure which one. But what it amounts to is one of my neighbors is a realtor, and she actually knew that I had just recently retired and knew that I was looking to invest into real estate. She brought me this property that was stuck back in the 70s, and she knew the previous owners, and that's how I was able to get it from her. The property itself was vacant for over a year. One of the individual owners and the only owners that had it, he had passed away, and it was in the estate now for the folks, and they had just left the house kind of vacant for a year, and it really needed some TLC. It needed to be rehabbed completely, and it was just stuck in the 70s. Everything was overgrown. It was just a nice position to actually be in. It was distressed property that you don't normally find. At least I've looked, and it's difficult to find distressed property unless you know where you're looking. Now I know where I'm looking, but at the time I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you got this from a realtor, ultimately brought it to your attention. And just so the audience, we clarify, you're not a professional rehabber. You're not a professional real estate investor. This was your first rehab deal, right?
Oh yes. No, I've never done this before.
Okay.
And I wasn't out soliciting, but no, I'm not a professional flipper. This was the first house that I've ever renovated, and and I wasn't a professional investor. This was the first true real investment in my whole life. I own other things, but they were bought for other reasons and not for pure investment.
Okay. And so now moving on to the directing of the investment part. So you got the property under contract. I assume that same realtor that brought you the deal, you had them handle the contract for you in that process. Take us through what that looked like from signing the contract to reaching out to Equity Trust Company. How did you process that transaction?
I actually advised all parties that I was going to have to get my other partner involved, which is Equity Trust, to review all the paperwork, sign off on the paperwork, in addition to issue the funds that need to be issued for earnest money. And here in North Carolina, you have to provide due diligence money also. So sent the contracts in, make sure everything was okay, and requested the monies to be sent to the attorney that we had agreed to use.
Okay.
So
great.
From that, we just went to after that was done, we went through the process of the due diligence and then closing on the property. We closed on the property, I believe, about 60 days afterwards. And the reason why it was 60 days, and it could have been a lot quicker than that, but the only reason why it was 60 days was because there was some well water issues that I wanted to resolve before I would agree to purchase the home. And once that was resolved, that's when we completed the purchase.
Okay, great. And from a custodian's perspective, to take our viewers through that process and some of the nuts and bolts, Mark had mentioned a purchase contract. So he's got the documentation, and he mentioned sending that to Equity Trust Company. So the way that would work is, in the way the MyEquity real estate investment platform operates, is Mark would be able to simply log online and say, Equity Trust, I'm buying this property, contract price is $89,000. I need a earnest money deposit. And Mark, how much was the earnest money deposit for you?
I believe it was just $1,000 and then $500 for due diligence.
Okay. So Mark would go online and request a check for $1,500 earnest money to be sent out to the designated escrow account. And the way it works through Equity Trust is we have an online system where Mark can enter in all the information, contract price, estimated date of closing, all the other details, and really in under 5 minutes have an earnest money deposit sent out via check or sent out via ACH direct deposit or wire transfer. So now that money leaves the Equity Trust IRA, and at that point, we then would have the client, in this case Mark, go through the remaining process online, providing all the necessary details. If there are closing documents that Equity Trust needs to sign, then he would upload those documents to Equity Trust Company. We would sign the necessary documents per the client's direction, per Mark's direction, and then we would send those documents out to the title company along with a wire transfer for the remaining balance. So at that point, the transaction is officially effected, and in return for the cash is a deed to the property. So just like buying a stock, for those that are new on the call, just like buying a stock or a mutual fund, cash leaves the account. In return for that cash is a stock certificate. When buying properties, it's the same concept. Cash leaves the account. In return for that cash is a deed to the property. So now there's a deed to this house, and as you can see on the slide here, Mark bought it for $89,000, and he put $64,000 worth of work into the property. So that now takes us to the managing of the investment. So we got through step 1 and 2. We're now moving on to step 3, which is manage the investment. So Mark, tell us a little bit about your experience with the rehab. Tell us a little bit about how you found your contractors and what that process looked like.
Sure. Being the very first investment that I've ever had, it was difficult finding contractors initially. And the reason is because I've never done this. I didn't know where to look, and it took me a few months to really find first base, because it doesn't necessarily happen, at least I've found it doesn't necessarily happen like it does on TV, on HGTV, where they rehab a house in 30 to 60, 90 days. I haven't found that. They do it in 30 minutes or an hour, but I couldn't even do it do it that fast. But I'm also going to talk about the next investment, because the next investment that is on a slide, a couple of slides from right now, I partnered up with a realtor, a builder, another investor, and myself. Now, what that afforded me was having a builder I was one of 4 partners, all equal partnership. I had a builder that was involved with that I would constantly go to him and ask. I'm in need of a drywall contractor. I'm in need of a contractor that will actually do landscaping. I'm in need of a contractor to paint. I'm in need of, and he would give me his contacts, and which was really very good, because he's been a builder in the business for 20 years. So I'm using basically his contractors that he works with, because he's a general contractor that he has historically worked with. So it gives me leverage with those folks that's coming from him to begin with, because when I call them and let them know that Mr. Williams told me to give you a call, I mean, they're always right on it, and I always had good contractors from using that, if you will. Once I figured out what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, and it was a godsend to have somebody on my team like that.
Yeah, and Mark, I appreciate what you told me in our preparation call about identifying a group of like-minded investors in your local market. Could you speak a little bit about how you found that real estate investment group and how you got yourself plugged into that group?
Sure. Well, just exactly like I said, I was one of 4 partners. The other partner is a realtor, and I've relied on him. I actually brought him out to this house after I purchased it, and he said, "You've made a good purchase. You actually need to keep your rehab cost to X so that you can actually turn a profit." But more importantly, the other thing that he's turned me on to is every Friday morning at 7 a.m., there's a meeting that occurs with all real estate investors, real estate brokers, real estate agents, and they actually have a topic. An individual normally speaks to some topic every meeting itself too. It's at 7 a.m. and it's called the Sunrisers, and it's over breakfast. And what these folks actually do, even though they're competitors, after this is all over with, they're really not competitors. They're actually sharing, well, here's a property that I just purchased. All I'm looking for is I've got it sold. I just need somebody to come in and rehab it. Or what they need is somebody to wholesale it, or they need somebody with hard money or what have you. They actually, it's an opportunity to go and find real estate investments, whether it's for to flip the thing, to rehab it and rent and hold it, or again, notes, hard money, etc. And there's all kinds of opportunities. That's only one chapter that I've ever gone to, and there's like 4 of those here in Charlotte. But every Friday they get together, and that's one of the business partners itself too. But the other thing that I actually did was I've got an attorney, and I had a contract that I needed some advice with. So between my attorney, myself, and we got Equity Trust on the phone to actually work through the mechanics of the partnership to satisfy all parties, meaning because the realtor wanted, I mean, not the realtor, the attorney for the entity needed some sort of language, and we were able to work it out to where it satisfied Equity Trust, which is satisfying really IRS rules, so that we could actually move forward with an investment. So equity trust is part of the team too. It's not just the realtor in addition to, the attorney and the accountant. It is equity trust too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Mark. That's a great point, because when you have us as one member of your financial team alongside the attorney or CPA, realtor, title company, etc., you can have that conference call with you on the line, and we can talk through that. And just like I mentioned in the disclaimer, of course, for all our viewers, is we don't give legal advice or opine on transactions. But if a title company or attorney has questions about, for example, titling for the investment, that's the big one, something we haven't talked about. So for viewers that are on the call, what Mark's talking about there is making sure that the titling is proper. So the buyer of the home, or as we're going to talk about private lending in a moment, the lender, if it's an IRA, wouldn't be the account owner's name or their LLC. It would be Equity Trust Company, Custodian, FBO as in for benefit of, the account holder's name, IRA. And if it's a Roth IRA, they might put Roth IRA. If it's a covered education savings account, it's going to be Equity Trust Company, Custodian, FBO as in for benefit of, the account holder's name, CISA. If it's a health savings account, it's going to be HSA. So it's very, very important that from the initial purchase contract all the way through the entire title process, that titling is proper. And so I'm glad you did that, Mark. And that is a good idea to, if needed, to conference Equity Trust into those phone calls. Yes, we can't give tax or legal advice, but we could certainly answer the questions about the process, the titling for the IRA itself, and those other sort of logistical items. That being said, talking about the rehab costs, the $64,000 in rehab costs, Mark, did you have a general contractor that you made installment payments to? How did that work in terms of getting that money from the IRA and out to the recipients of those funds?
You did mention something earlier, the bill pay, which is in Equity Trust system. It's the payment wizard. It is very easy to use, and I just wish I would have known about that when I did when I actually needed the escrow money. I was doing everything via phone to begin with, rather than I wasn't up to speed like I am today. And let me tell you, the payment wizard is very easy to do. It's a bill paying system, basically, is what it boils down to. It is easy to do, and then afterwards, Equity Trust sends out a note to you as a confirmation, so you know that it's been reviewed. Then you get a follow-up note after that not only has it been reviewed, now it's been processed and it's been sent to you, whichever way that you wanted it. Via regular mail, overnight mail, wire, or what have you. And it is very easy to use. Now, there's some bumps in the roads that I had to begin with, though, was when do you do it? When do you do it and how do you do it? Meaning, like, I had an HVAC contractor that came in and did a whole new system, and I had a check overnighted to him, and he received it on Friday, and the job was supposed to have been completed on Friday, but they didn't finish it on Friday. They didn't finish it until Saturday. And everyone knows you kind of hate paying a contractor before the job's actually completed. Now, what I have done since then, though, and what I've learned was, as of late, because the other investments that I'm involved in now, I'll actually still have the check made out to the correct parties, the correct individual, and then I'll hand the check to the contractor when it's done. And I'll send it, I'll overnight it and send it to myself, because like on this particular case, the HVAC contractor, he said, "Oh yeah, my wife said she got the check today, but thank you very much." But there was no incentive for him to come back other than that they had a contract that said that they were going to, if you will. Where this actually helps satisfy that you actually have the check in hand. And some of the folks will bill you, but the majority of the folks, they want their money as soon as the contract's finished. Or it could actually be you need the money for them to start the construction process to begin with. They might need a third of it up front, a third of it during the process, and then a third when it's actually completed. And by using the bill paying system, you can do exactly that and just have the check sent to you, and then you can deliver to the contractor or whoever the services are for, or what the services were for.
That's a great point, Mark, for our audience members, because that's something I know folks have learned that lesson in the past as well. And for our audience members out there, when issuing checks from your IRA, of course, all checks must be issued to a disinterested third party, whether it's a contractor, if it's for utilities or taxes, insurance. Ultimately, Mark would not be able to have a check issued to him personally to reimburse him. That could be considered a Internal Revenue Code 4975 self-dealing prohibited transaction. So what Mark is doing is he has those checks made payable to his contractors. He has the checks mailed to him, to his address, made payable to the contractors, and then he's hand delivering those to the contractors once the services are performed. And I've seen it done both ways. I've seen it done where the checks are sent directly out to the recipient, or sometimes the checks are being sent to the account holder, and then the account holder is essentially just forwarding those checks over to whomever they're paying. Also, and I'm glad you mentioned, Mark, about the MyEquity bill pay system. So we do have the capability now, and it hasn't always been this way, but we now have the capability to send an ACH direct deposit. And what's great about the ACH direct deposit is, number one, there's no additional equity trust fee. So a wire transfer, there's a fee associated with a wire transfer being sent from the IRA. But with an ACH direct deposit, there's no additional fee, and that's unlimited ACH deposits. So if you needed to send an ACH deposit to a contractor, as long as you have their account number and routing number, essentially their information, banking information, you would key that into the system. You could even do it with your smartphone device by logging into your account, and then you could do a ACH direct deposit out to that contractor. Did you, Mark, did you have something else to add there?
Yeah, the ACH is the only one that I haven't used. But then, just like the other day, I sent the annual dollars in for an insurance payment. I'll do that. I'm not doing that. I'll do it through Equity Trust and have them send it directly to the party, to whatever party it is. And I've done that with telephone, excuse me, not telephone, but electric, in addition to water, et cetera. Now, just for information purposes only, so that somebody else doesn't get in the same pickle that I actually did, it's not a reoccurring payment. If they set it up as a reoccurring payment, it'll be sent out the same thing twice, meaning that I did that initially with the electric bill. So they would send the same amount as that first electric bill. And then I also did that with the insurance for the builder's risk itself too. They were getting double. We were getting double the checks. So you've got to figure out it's not constant. Just do it one time, and you can do it each time yourself. It's actually easy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I encourage folks to go there and kind of self-serve through that process. But of course, for those that are brand new to the process, feel free to give us a call, and we can help guide you through that process over the phone and make it as simple and easy for you as possible. So of course, getting to the good stuff here, rehab cost $64,000, sold it for approximately $200,000, made a $45,000 tax advantage profit. So when I say tax advantage, this was a traditional IRA, correct, Mark? This is a traditional IRA.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, so this is what we refer to as a tax deductible account or tax deferred account. So when money was going into there from his contributions or 401k contributions, he was receiving tax deductions. It's growing tax deferred, and eventually when Mark begins withdrawing the money, he would pay ordinary income taxes. But the advantage, of course, of an IRA is that it's tax exempt in the year in which you have that income coming back in. So that $45,000 in profit, let's take a look if that $45,000 profit was outside of Mark's IRA environment or IRA account. Let's say it was let's say he had a 20% effective tax on that $45,000 profit. So if we do that math, that's close to $9,000 in taxes. Now that's just a hypothetical scenario factoring in a hypothetical 20% effective tax rate. But if you look at ordinary income tax rates on short-term capital gains, $45,000, if I had a 20% effective tax rate, let's say state and federal, that's close to $9,000 in taxes. This $45,000, because it's in an IRA, is captured in that retirement plan, and it's exempt from taxation. It's exempt from that taxation. Eventually, when he pulls money out of the account in his retirement years, whatever amount is withdrawn is added to his ordinary income, and then he pays taxes. So for those of you that are new to this concept, that's just a quick lesson in tax-deferred savings and looking at it in contrast to doing deals or doing investments, if you will, outside of a retirement plan. So $45,000 in profit. Mark, on the sale of that property, take us through how that process looked for you.
It was very similar to just like the whole rehab itself. In purchasing it, when I had the contract, we actually sent all the paperwork to Equity Trust to review, to make sure that everything was fine. We set it up. We did the closing, and I know it was reviewed from the folks at Equity Trust, and there wasn't any issues. And the only issue was getting the closing attorneys. The closing attorney's information so that we could actually receive the wire transfer once the closing actually took place. And there was no issues with Equity Trust. It was just the only not issues that we actually had was through the buyer, knowing full well, did anything change, and getting those documents to the closing attorney and the final documents to Equity Trust. And once we did all that, it was smooth.
Okay, that's great. So in recap there, Mark had the necessary information sent to Equity Trust Company, and then ultimately a wire transfer was sent back into the IRA. And that's an important part for those that are new to this concept. The entire principal amount and all the profit goes directly back into the IRA. If Mark were to take that personally, that would be a distribution and a taxable event. So it's important to note here that all that money is going directly back into the retirement plan. Before I move on to the next transaction that Mark's going to talk about, just a quick plug for our live events. And the reason why I'm bringing this up and why I thought of this is Mark had mentioned the real estate investor group that he connected with. And one of the things that we do here at Equity Trust Company that a lot of people aren't familiar with is we host live one-day workshops all across the country. And we actually have one, in fact, coming up in Charlotte. And for those of you that are on the call, if you want to look up all of our event locations and get registered for one of these one-day live workshops, you can go to IRAevents.com. Again, that's IRAevents.com. And we have St. Louis coming up, Salt Lake City, Cleveland, Boise, Idaho, and then Charlotte on May 18th. So, Mark, we will have to connect maybe sometime in the following days and see if we can get you out for another speaking engagement at our Charlotte event. And we also have one in Virginia Beach and Omaha, Nebraska coming up. We'll have others as well added to the calendar throughout the year. So keep your eyes peeled for our live wealth building workshops, IRAevents.com. And we do bring in folks just like Mark and many others to talk about the different types of transactions that they're doing in their self-directed IRAs. So it's a very case study type driven workshop. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the next transaction. So Mark completed the transaction we just talked about. Moving on to this investment. Now this is a little different because it's a note. Now the first transaction, Mark's IRA was holding a deed to the property. But another way in which folks can invest with their self-directed IRA is to make loans secured by real estate or potentially unsecured loans. Now again, it's up to Mark or up to the account holder to do their own due diligence on making loans and whether they're secured or unsecured loans. But Mark, if you could take us through this transaction from the very beginning, how you found the opportunity. You talked a little bit about it already with your investor group or investor network, but take us through this transaction.
Sure. The realtor that got me involved with this, he was a friend of mine. I was introduced to him from my oldest son, and he knew I wanted to get involved with real estate also, and he asked me, what do you want to do? Do you want to actually buy some rehab properties? Do you want to just rent, or do you want invest in notes, or how do you want to do it? And I said, whatever makes more sense. I'm not sure. So having said that, about 2 months later, he came to me with this opportunity. And the opportunity for this was, they needed somebody else to invest $100,000 and then spend another, and then also invest another $25,000 in the holding, the interest payments, if you will, for the loan from the bank. So, excuse me. So he got me involved with this, and initially it was going to be a rehab of an existing house that was there. The property is located about 2 miles south of downtown Charlotte in a very desirable area, and they are rehabbing houses in this area. Now, the builder itself initially, that was he's one of the partners, had said that the margins are kind of tight. I'm not sure whether it makes sense to rehab this. The realtor knew what the codes were in Charlotte and was able to actually turn this into 2 properties rather than 1 property, because it was on a corner, and have each property face each street, so you could actually have 2 properties on two homes on one existing lot itself. So ultimately, that's what we did. It was a tear down and put 2 $700,000 homes on this one lot versus one $700,000 loan, or $700,000 property. So, and again, what they used me for was they needed a loan for $100,000 and the carrying cost for the loan that they were taking out, and that was $25,000. Again, I was one of 4 partners, and ultimately what we ended up with was $75,000 apiece, or or in this particular case, $300,000 split between 4 of us. So it was
Okay.
a great find. I wish there was more of these that would come down the pike.
Mm-hmm. So Mark, did you get a promissory note? Was that the actual financial instrument, if you will, that you received or your IRA received?
No, it was an unsecured.
Okay.
An
Gotcha.
unsecured note.
Okay. So you had an unsecured note in the IRA.
We had to do we had to do an unsecured note because they actually took out a loan, and the loan wasn't in the name. It could not be titled or anything in the name of me, and that's why we did it that way, if you will. And that's one of the reasons why we contacted my attorney, contacted Equity Trust to work through how we could set this up. to where it worked for all parties. And ultimately, that's why we had to do an unsecured note.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. And so for our viewers, there's secured notes and unsecured notes. So in this case, Mark got all of his financial team members in place and made a loan to a business entity. I assume it was like a loan. Was it to an LLC, the Builders LLC? Okay. So
Yep.
made a loan to the Builders LLC. He was partnering with a few other individuals as well. And then ultimately, upon the sale, the monies were returned split according to the agreements, and his IRA made a $74,000 interest income profit, if you will, into the retirement plan. So at closing, that money went back into the IRA. For those of you that are not familiar with this process or concept, the process in directing the funds, Mark would complete a direction of investment form called a private debt direction of investment form, and he would send that to Equity Trust Company along with a copy of the note itself. Now, we just recently launched our private debt wizard through MyEquity. So now our customers can go through that entire process online. They can e-sign the necessary documentation so they don't have to print and sign and send back. And they can document upload their promissory notes and mortgage or deeds of trust so that we have all the necessary documents to process the investment. So there is some additional technology functionality that ultimately can help you out there. As far as if you were to loan secured, so if you were doing a loan, you had a promissory note and you had a mortgage or deed of trust, depending on the state in which you're lending the money in on the properties you're lending on, we would get a copy of the promissory note and a copy of the deed of trust or mortgage, and then we would process the money being sent out given the client's direction. And then ultimately, all the interest and principal income would go directly back into the self-directed IRA. I mentioned the MyEquity bill pay functionality here, and just to kind of put folks' eyes on that system, this would be where you'd log on into the account online, and ultimately you could process your transactions in real time. So you don't necessarily need to fill out a paper form or contact us via phone and try to effect a transaction. Just about everything you may need to do through your Equity Trust account, you can do through this online management system. That being said, as this kind of plays in the background for folks, Mark, tell us a little bit about you completed this loan investment. What are you doing now? 2019 onwards, what are your plans going forward? What types of transactions are you looking at?
Well, the last one that you just showed, John, we closed on the property, I believe the 20th of December. We all went out, celebrated, had dinner for Christmas, and then shortly thereafterwards, two of the three folks that was involved with this, I was one of four. Two of those three have asked me, and I've invested in two additional properties with them. Now this time it's not an unsecured; it is secured, and it's secured through real estate on both of those. There's two separate transactions. One of them, both of them were closed in the month of January. One of them for $135,000 and the other one for $150,000, of which there's a total of 4 homes being built from the ground up. What they had bought was lots, and now they're building on those lots themselves, building they're called small luxury homes.
Okay. And so is that, how are you charged?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, how are you charging like a per annum interest rate, a flat interest rate? How do you carve up those loan agreements?
Both. One of them was done The one for $150,000 was done on a pure guaranteed interest, and they guaranteed me 20%. So on the $150,000, I'll make $30,000 on that investment. Which, when they came to me and was asking me this, that's back when the stock market had tanked, and my wife's saying, "You're buying more real estate?" And I said, "Well, yes, I'm going to be able to make 20% on our money, whereas I don't believe we can do that right now in the stock market." So the first one is at 20%. The other one was sharing part of the profit. Sharing part of the profit was no less than 15%, but it could actually be more than 20%. And on that one, I actually anticipate that was the one for $135,000. And I would prefer to share in the profit. The reason is that they have more of an incentive. They, meaning me as an investor too. The builder has more of an incentive when they share in the profit rather than just paying me a flat fee for my investment.
Okay. Outstanding. Yeah, that helps out, giving audience members an incredible amount of detail in terms of how those transactions are put together. And, again, I'll echo, and particularly because Equity Trust takes our passive nature as a custodian very, very seriously, in that, we want our clients to be reaching out to their members of their financial team based on the various discipline necessary. So if it's legal work, it's, an attorney, potentially that's drafting all the legal documentation, the promissory notes, the deeds of trust or mortgages, and making sure that all parties are being taken care of properly. So, I really admire, Mark, you reaching out to the necessary professionals and then coordinating with Equity Trust Company in terms of what you need for your custodial services. And as always, quick disclaimer as we start to wrap things up here. Mark has talked about some of his returns on investment, and I think he mentioned a 20% return on investment there. Again, hats off to you, Mark. Of course, prior performance is not predictive of future results. So for those of you that are out there listening into the webinar, certainly make sure that you're performing your own due diligence prior to engaging in transactions. But again, Mark, an incredible story in the returns on investments that you've been able to achieve. And most importantly, as we talk about here, doing it in a tax-advantaged environment. I was just running some compounding interest calculations earlier today for my team and showing, over 15 years, starting with $150,000 and making a consistent 18% return on investment year over year, compounding just once per year in a tax-exempt environment, one would have well over $1.5 million. So when you start to look at those returns compared to, a 3 or 4 or 5% return, it's quite incredible. So again, wonderful job, Mark. We really appreciate you being on the call today and taking the time. As we start to wrap things up here, as far as for those of you that are interested in looking into Equity Trust Company a little bit more, if you're new to this concept or you're already an existing customer and you're looking for more information on some of the other account opportunities, whether it's a covered education savings account or it's a health savings account, or maybe you're looking at a solo 401k or a Roth IRA, we do have the services to be able to provide some additional information and guidance. Of course, as I said, we're not your financial advisors or your CPAs, but we could certainly talk about the different account types, how you can potentially contribute to those accounts or transfer money over, roll money over, and then help you moving forward. Webinars at trustetc.com. For those of you who are interested in a consultation to talk through how to get started, how to establish and fund your account, I'd encourage you to take advantage of that. You can email us at webinars at trustetc.com. Just include in the subject line consultation. And then also, if for those that are interested, we do have additional case studies. We have a report and guide that we put together, Self-Directed Investments Revealed, 9 client case studies revealed and how others are building wealth with self-directed IRAs. So if you're interested in that free additional education, as well as a consultation, please feel free to email us at webinars@trustetc.com. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and leave that slide up for a few moments. Mark, any closing remarks or comments or anything else you can think of at this time that would be helpful to our viewers or audience members?
Yeah, yes, there is one other thing that I meant to tell you too, though, John, is that I actually did buy another property, and I bought it in February. I closed on it in 3 weeks, and how I was able to close on it in 3 weeks was because I said, I got an all-cash offer. And I gave them a copy of a statement that I've got the money in the account, and I'm ready to move on this property if you are. And it was a little bit of a distressed property, so I'm in the process of rehabbing it now. But my point for the callers is you can use that as leverage too. That you've got money deposited in on an account with Equity Trust and all cash offer, and people will. And there's no, I don't have to be approved for a loan. I'm just going to buy the property, period. So it actually does help to have that in your back pocket too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, Mark. I appreciate that. In fact, I just spoke to a young lady yesterday evening, and she's moving quickly on a real estate investment. And she had a similar experience, in fact, as you, Mark. She set up an account with another company that only handles stocks and mutual funds, and she was of the impression that she could actually buy real estate with the account, and then she discovered that she couldn't. So ultimately, she's setting up an account with Equity Trust Company. She's going to move her money over, and because she's going to be an all-cash buyer, she was able to negotiate with the seller's realtor to be able to waive, if you will, the earnest money deposit requirement, and then she'll just come in as an all-cash buyer. And once she gets her account set up and running here at Equity Trust Company, she'll be able to then deploy the money for the final purchase of the property. So absolutely. The other point I'll mention there for audience members is proof of fund statement. So if one needs a proof of fund statement, they can use their Equity Trust statement, which would include their cash balance. They could simply log on to their My Equity system in order to obtain that information if a seller's agent or any other individual was looking for that information. Let's see, anything else you can think of, Mark, off the top of your head?
No, John.
Okay.
I just wish I would have known about this 10 years earlier than I did. I'm glad I knew it today. I'm glad I know it today, but I just wish I'd have known it 10 years earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, we can't beat ourselves up over that because we don't know what we don't know. And, that's why we do these types of webinars, is to try to educate and inform folks on how they could utilize their self-directed IRAs. We love bringing clients onto the calls with us to really do the instruction. Mark, you've been fantastic. Great presenter. Really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you in the near future. For all of our audience members and callers, I would encourage you to, as Mark talked about before, don't let yourself get into that sort of regretful mindset. If you know that this makes sense for you, you've done your due diligence. Like I said on step one, open your account, get the account funded as soon as possible. So when that deal presents itself, it could be the deal of the century for you, right? And there could be a lot of tax advantage profit potential. Make sure the account is set up and funded well in advance. I can't emphasize that enough on a call like this. The reason why is because in working within our call centers here at Equity Trust Company, I hear it every single day. Folks calling in and they didn't get their account set up and funded when they should have, and they miss out on deals, or they have additional fees associated with the transaction. And ultimately, it gives them, it can be a headache as well, right? Trying to move quickly through a transaction. The last thing you want to have to worry about is having your money in your Equity Trust IRA and ready to go to be deployed for your real estate investments or private lending opportunities. So I encourage folks to take action. Email us at webinars@trustetc.com with questions. If you want to set up a consultation, our agents here can help you through the paperwork over the phone to make it nice and easy for you and streamline. And then ultimately, you're going to print, sign, send back, and we'll help you moving forward with that. So with that being said, again, I will echo one last time, Mark, congratulations on being 2018 Investor of the Year. And hopefully, for those of you that are out there listening, you'll be one of our 2019 Investor of the Years, or hopefully registrants. So with that being said, thank you so much, everyone, for being on the call this evening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.